When did you learn that, and how did you learn that Maggie and Paul were murdered on the night of June the 7th?
Well, Alec called me, and Liz and I, we have 3 younger kids. I mean, our youngest is 8 now, so it would have been 6 at the time, and so we don't have a lot of free time to ourselves. But that night we were watching television,
Well, let me back up. Had Alec called you earlier in the night when he was on his way to
Oh, yes, sir.
his mom's?
Yes, sir.
And we got phone records of that. What do you recall of that conversation?
He called, just checking on me, just said, I saw the news about Dad, things look good, It was a brief conversation, and I hate to say it, but I kind of said, listen, man, Liz and I finally have a few minutes. Can we talk tomorrow? We're watching a movie.
And what was his demeanor when you spoke with him on the evening of the 7th?
Same as always, just normal.
And then later on that night, you got another phone call from him? And
I got when you asked the question, how did I learn? Yes, Alec called me and just absolutely hysterical. As soon as I heard his voice, I knew something bad was going on. Didn't know what. I'm in my pajamas. He said, something bad is really happening. I don't know what his exact words, but I think he said, Maggie and Paul have been hurt really badly. Please get here as fast as you can. And, I drop what I'm doing and I go get dressed and I'm hurrying. I'm, just so many things are going through your mind. You don't know what to do. So I get dressed and I run outside and realize I don't have a car. Paul's car's out there and it is a hunk of junk. And I mean,
this was the farm truck.
This was a farm truck, and so I knew I couldn't take my wife's car because she was taking the kids to school. And at this point, I knew something bad. I just didn't know how bad it was.
And so, did you then get in the farm truck and head to Moselle?
I did.
And what happened along the way?
Well, so along the way, I'd spoken to Randy. He asked me to try to get in touch with a close family friend and one of their law partners, Danny Henderson. I was just constantly trying to call him. I'm driving fast. I'm trying to get to Moselle. And, once I got Danny and told him that he needed to get up there, I had just a few minutes to myself, and I was crying. And somebody called me shortly after that. I don't know who it was. I can't remember, but I remember it was either Alec or Randy, I believe, and they said the sheets were being pulled over them.
Did the farm truck break down?
It did.
How'd you end up getting to Moselle?
Well, so let me back up and tell you. So the route that from my house down in Okatee, Beaufort, takes me to Coosawhatchee, and I get on 95 to go to Yemassee and getting off and coming up that way. Well, another close family friend, his name is Greg Alexander. He is the chief of police in Yemassee. I reach out to him, and I just say, Greg, I gave him said something bad had happened. Or again, I don't know when I was told about the sheets, but I told him, I said, listen, something bad's happened. We got to get up there. When I get to Yemassee, can you please help make sure I get to Moselle? Because this truck's sputtering, and I knew it wasn't good. And he met me at Yemassee, and he fell in behind me, and we started driving until he finally passed me in Varnville. Well, go ahead.
And did he end up driving you the rest of the way?
Well, he did. So he passed me shortly before Varnville. He took a right on 63, and he was a little ways ahead of me when the truck quit on me. I called him and said, Greg, I said, come back and get me. The truck has broken down. And, of course, he picked me up and took me straight on to Moselle.
Were there any guns in the farm truck that Paul had left when you got in it?
I have no idea. It was dark when I got in it. As y'all can imagine, I was frantic. I jumped in it and I took off.
Did you ever see any guns in it?
That night, never. I mean, I didn't look. I mean, it just, I wasn't looking in the back seat. I wasn't worried about anything except getting to Moselle.
Okay. Do you remember about the time you got to Moselle? What time was it, roughly? Or better yet, who was there when you got there?
Well, there were. I mean, well before I got to Moselle, or we got to Moselle, you could see the lights flashing. It was just, there were tons of people. Mostly what I would describe as first responders of some sort.
And when you pulled up, where did you go?
So we came in the main gate and came around, and they had created a small crime scene. And when we pulled up, I saw Alec, and I think before Greg even stopped the car, I jumped out and ran to him.
And what was his condition, Alex?
Oh, he was just broken. I mean, distraught. I mean, everybody was. There were a few other people there, but he just, all we did is hugged and cried. I mean, I don't even know that we talked.
How long did you stay down adjacent to the crime scene? Do you recall?
Quite some time. I have to assume that I probably was there at the 11 o'clock-ish. I don't know what time I got there, but I don't think we went back up to the house, until well after midnight, maybe 2, 3.
And when you went to the house, do you recall if any sled agents came up there?
Well, I did not see any. I heard some testimony of some came and got some clothes, but I did not see any sled agents at the house. The last officer that I remember seeing that night, or officers, were the ones that told us that we needed to leave that area, that they were going to be doing stuff with the bodies, and that we needed to go to the house.
Right. When you went into the house, were there other people in there when you got in?
There were. Most people that I knew. Some of Alex's partners, Randy's partners, family members, Lynn.
Was there food out or had food? What was it? Had anything?
Well, I didn't see any food, but I saw pots and pans, and I saw folks that were cleaning up. They were removing pots and pans, but I never opened it and looked in it, so I presumed that it was food. They cleaned dishes. They put the pots and pans away or in the refrigerator.
Was a TV on in the house? Do you remember?
Based on what I know, I would say it is, but I can't tell you 100% that it was on. But I'd be willing to bet it was.
What do you mean when you say based on what you know?
Well, I don't think I'd ever been in that house without the TV being on if Alec and Maggie were there.
After did you ultimately go to Alameda that evening with Alec, Buster, and his girlfriend Brooklyn?
We did.
Do you remember what Alec was wearing when he went to Alameda?
Not precise. I mean, I can't. He was wearing shorts and a T-shirt. I can't tell you details, but it was shorts and a T-shirt. like relaxed shorts.
Do you know whether he had had a shower or not?
It appeared he had. I mean, his hair was not. I didn't see him in the shower, but I can tell you, I think he had a shower.
I understand. So then, let's move forward to the morning of the June 8th. I guess, did you get any sleep the night of June the 7th?
Very little. I don't know that I fell asleep. I've certainly laid in the bed. It just, as you can imagine, just the thoughts and things. I don't know if I slept. When I got up and started moving the next day, I certainly didn't feel like I'd slept.
What did you do the next day when you got up?
You talking about precisely or generally?
Just generally.
I got up and Alec was up. I don't think Buster and Buckman were. I told Alec that I was going over to Greenfield. My farm that I told you all about is 2 or 3 miles away, so it's very close. And I have all, plenty of clothes over there. So I told him I was going over there to shower and put on fresh clothes. and that I would meet him at Moselle.
And did you go to Moselle?
I did, after I left Greenfield. Yes, sir.
And do you remember who was there when you got to Moselle?
I was the first one there.
And what'd you do?
I just went to stay there until I knew Buster, Brooklyn, and Alec were coming. I suspected that other family members and partners, I knew others were coming, so I just kind of sat there just, just in disbelief still. It's just, moments of just...
Was the door to the house unlocked? Do you remember?
That's a good question. I've thought about it. I don't remember.
Right.
It either was unlocked or I had the code, because there's a keypad on a side door, but I can't tell you which door I went in. I don't know.
Did you eventually go down to the kennels?
I did. Once everyone got there, there was a fair amount of activity in the house with family and law partners, Alex's law partners, Randy's law partners. I just felt like I needed to go down. I needed to see for myself what had gone on, and just kind of take it in. I mean, just maybe for some type of understanding.
How long did you stay down there at the kennels?
Well, I can't. I don't know. But I will say this: before I went, I was unsure whether I was allowed to go, because I knew it was a crime scene, and so I reached out to a friend of mine in law enforcement, and said, "Listen, I don't know who's handling the crime scene. I don't know whatever." He said, "Well, I'll find out and make sure that it's clear for you to go." And he said, "Don't go until I tell you." And he called me back a few minutes later and said he had spoken to I believe it was Captain Ryan Neal, and had given the okay that everything was released and it was okay to go there.
And was it cleaned up?
No, Jim, it was not cleaned up.
Okay. Were there skull fragments?
Yeah, so excuse me, this is going to be really difficult. So I could easily see where Maggie had been. I saw the night before where the sheets were, and somebody had told me that who was who, and so I could see where Maggie had been, and it was grass, and they had covered it up with dirt, so there really was nothing to see where Maggie was. I walked over to the feed room, and y'all have heard the descriptions. Y'all saw it. I've never seen pictures, and I've told them before coming to this court that I was not going to see pictures. But y'all can imagine what I experienced. It had not been cleaned up. I saw blood. I saw brains. I saw pieces of skull. And when I say brains, it could just be tissue. I don't know what I was seeing. It was terrible. And for some reason, I thought it was something that I needed to do for Paul to clean it up. I felt like it was the right thing to do. I felt like I owed him, and I started cleaning. And I can promise you, no mother or father or aunt or uncle should ever have to see and do what I did that day. I don't know. I'm not blaming anybody, but it's just I was just overwhelmed. I did everything I could, and I would have moments where I would stop crying for a moment, and just in disbelief. At one point, I called my brother Randy, and told him what I was doing, trying to describe what I was doing, and he immediately told me to stop doing it. It was not good for me. It was not healthy for me to be there. And I couldn't stop. I had to do it for Paul. That's just what I had to do. And I don't know, it's probably 15, 20 minutes later, Mark Ball shows up. Y'all heard Mark Ball testify. And he came and hugged me and told me it was okay to leave. Okay to leave what was left of Paul. They would clean it up. It's the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life.
Yes, sir. What'd you do next?
Mark basically got me. I'm sure I was just a basket case, but he got me back to the house and, got me back around family and, just got back to, the support of others that were there. And there were a lot of people at the house at that point.
Do you remember when you got back to the house, at some point in time, people raising questions or bringing up the fact that Maggie's phone had not been located?
Yeah, so that was, particular the lawyers, they were all, being lawyers, they were, questioning things amongst themselves and, how could this happen, trying to figure things out. But it was brought to my attention that Maggie's phone was not there and that law enforcement had not found it. And I can't say that, in fact, I can probably say that I didn't think of it because I'm not a big phone user or a big app user or whatnot. But somebody brought it to my attention and says, listen, if Buster or Alec, if they have an app on their phone, like Find My Phone or Find My Friends or an app like that, they said you very likely can find out where the phone is if the battery's not dead. And so I went to Buster and sure enough, I said, Buster, do you have this one of these apps like they're talking about? And he said, yeah, sure I do. I said, well, open it up. He opened it up and he handed me the phone, and I see Maggie's name, and I press it where to activate it, and it pings Maggie's phone just out front of the property. And I was like, I hate to say it, but I said, holy shit, there it is. And I said, Buster, I'm taking your phone. I'm gonna go back down to the shed and show it to law enforcement.
And who did you approach first about the phone?
Well, I don't know who it was. Presumably it was SLED agents, because keep in mind, I didn't know any of these guys with SLED. I mean, there were a couple of faces that I'd seen before, but I don't know these guys. I've come to know them, but I don't know them or didn't know them then. So I went up to a SLED agent or two SLED agents and said, presumably SLED agents, and said, hey, I've got Buster's phone here, and it's got an app on it that can find the phone, and it's showing Maggie's phone's right out here. Y'all want to let's go get it. And he said, no need. We have technology coming later today that we should be able to find it. And it blew me away that I'm sitting here showing them where Maggie's phone is, but they won't take the time to walk with me or take this phone itself. I mean, I'd give them the phone to go find it. So I walk over. I knew Duffy Stone. He was the solicitor. I knew one of his investigators. I walked over to them, said the exact same thing, and they immediately said, absolutely, let's go find this thing before the battery goes dead.
And what happened?
That we did that. Well, we started walking down the back entrance, or the kennel entrance, if you will. And as we were, and at that time, the agent was holding the phone. I'm looking at it with him. And when it pings, it creates a dot or a location. And that dot jumped from right at the end of that road down the road, I don't know, maybe a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. And so we walked back, got into a car, and drove down to where it was showing the phone.
And was the phone?
And I rode with those agents, the solicitor's office agents.
Was the phone ultimately located on the side of the road?
Absolutely. We found it in a matter of minutes.
Okay. Do you remember how it was collected? I mean, were you present when it was collected?
I was. So I was on. There's a cow pasture on one side and it's wooded on the other side, and I was on the side that the cow pasture's on, if you will. And I heard him say, "I got it." And so, of course, I walked back beside his car, and I'm good ways from it, but I see him over there, and I think he took either some ribbon or some flagging or flagging tape and marked the phone, and I don't think he touched it. I think he left it right where it was, called SLED, and maybe at that time, maybe they had been communicating, but SLED had blocked off the road at this point, and one of the agents came up and picked the phone up. Okay. And I don't know which agent. Again, I didn't know him.
Did any law enforcement officer ask you if you knew the password?
Yes. So once they and I'll say this. So they did take pictures of it while it was on the ground before they touched it. They picked it up. I think they had gloves on. They picked it up, brought it back to the trunk of the car, and opened it up in power zone. And they then asked, what's the password? And of course, I didn't know it.
Did you find out the password?
I did. I called Alec, and he gave me the password. I repeated it to the agent. They put the password in and said, "It's open."
So Alec provided you the password that you passed to the agents, and it opened the phone? Is that
yes,
correct?
Sir. That's correct.
John Marvin, were you aware of a news release that was issued that morning, Tuesday, June 8th, that the public had no need to be alarmed or concerned for their safety?
Yes, sir.
Well, what was your reaction to that?
I mean, it's quite baffling. It still is. 2 people have been killed, and they're telling me that everybody's safe. That tells me that whoever's done this is in jail, and they are 100% positive. Because if they're not in jail, nobody's safe.
Right. Did you go back to the residence at Moselle after finding the phone? Did you go back up to the house?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did SLED agents come through and search it while you were present?
They did. I don't know how long I'd been back up there, but they came and we kind of talked in the playroom, or I think some have described it as the gun room. They talked about that they needed to come in the house and search for things.
And did you escort, I think it was Agent McAllister, throughout the house?
Yes, it was Katie McAllister.
And did she tell you what she was looking for?
Initially, she says, well, the way she presented it was, there were so many people in the house. She said, listen, I don't want to just go barging in and make everybody run out of the house, but I'm going to take my badge off, my gun off, and if you would, just walk me through each room. And, particularly I'm looking for 12-gauge shotgun guns and 300 blackout and the ammunition for those calibers.
And as you're walking through the house with her, it appeared she was looking for other things besides just guns.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could tell she's looking, because she looked in spaces that guns wouldn't fit, so it makes sense that she could be looking for something else.
Such as what?
Well, I don't know.
I understand, but you said spaces. Did she look in the
bathrooms? I opened up up in the upstairs area. There's some cabinets that, a couple of them are pretty small. That, she could find ammunition in there, but I don't know how you would get a gun in there.
Did she search bathrooms?
She did. Well, I took her through every room in the house.
Right.
I mean, every single room.
Did you observe her looking in sinks and toilets and?
So yes, sir. What I observed is, like the shower, for example, it's a door. It's not an open shower. She opened the door and she looked around and, she was looking at. She easily would have known there was no gun in it when she opened it, but it was obvious that she was looking a little deeper.
Right. What kind of guns were there at Moselle?
Well, it sounds like the guns of all kinds, rifles, shotguns. I've seen bow and arrows. I've seen crossbows. most anything that you would hunt with.
Right. And were guns mostly in the gun room, to your knowledge, when you were over there?
Well, when I went through the house, we identified, I remember one gun in particular that was in the bedroom, a shotgun. I picked it up and said, you need to take this one. And we looked at it, and it was a 20 gauge. And she said, no, put that one back. So I put it back. So predominantly all the guns were in the gun room or playroom.